May God bless you as you participate.
Amen.
Amen. I hand you out to the doctor.
Well, thank you very much, Brother Makinde. And I want to thank the men of this church for giving me this opportunity as well to make this presentation. As you know, I'm a psychiatrist, and what we do is, part of what we do is to promote mental health. So when I was given this role, I was thinking, what would I present, right? Yeah. You guys never gave me any topic to present, so I'm sure most of you were expecting I would present about men's health problems, like prostate problems, problems with the waterworks. But I thought, how many of you are old enough to have prostate problems?
That's right.
So I thought, no, maybe that's not relevant. And of course, I was told the women were going to come as well. So I imagined some of the kids would come as well. So I thought a more relevant topic to speak on would be mental health disorders in young children and the youth. So I'm not going to take too much of your time, although I have about 50 slides here. So I'm going to run through some of them very fast because obviously we don't have much time anyway. So I would expect that at the end of it all, you can ask questions, and you possibly may also ask questions as we go along. Amen? Amen. Now today, I'm also going to try to put aside my Christian heart for a while,
Okay.
because if I don't do that, it becomes really difficult to make this presentation. What is mental health? Why talk about mental health problems? According to the WHO, right, the burden of mental health is going to be the second, for instance, depression is going to be the second highest burden of disease. In other words, that the government of this world spend money on, even more than heart disease, even more than, drugs, more than cancer, So it is therefore very important to talk about mental health, especially in the youth. And now there's some mental health problems that start in the young to start with. Of course, we're going to hope we will never have these mental health problems. Amen. Our children will never have it. Amen. We will never have it. Amen. But at least it's good to just be familiar with the presentation of mental health problems as it happens in other people. So I've titled this Mental Health Disorders in Young Children and Youth, a primer for parents, and of course for the youth as well. Now, the aim of this presentation would be to try and understand the differences, between the medical and mental health diagnosis and educational disability that the young people have, recognize the characteristics of common mental health problems and educational disabilities, respond to children and youth diagnosed with mental health problems and educational disabilities. Now, most times we as parents don't even pick up signs of illness in our children, right? Because they are children. Yes, we see these signs and we're thinking to ourselves, oh no, it's not a problem. It's just one of those things. People are going to overgrow it. But the teachers would pick these things up as well. So most times in children, especially the young children, young adolescents as well, mental health problems are picked up first in schools. So it's good to understand the terminologies that the schools use in terms of labeling mental health conditions. So I've just put this there. You shouldn't bother with it. DSM-4 is what we in the psychiatry field use to label disease. Because unless you understand how to describe a disease, you don't really have an entity, right? So people have, different types of abnormal behaviors. And unless you have a sort of aggregation of these symptoms together, you don't have a disease, right? So we use the DSM-4 for that. So in case you go to the family physicians and psychiatrists, they talk about that. That's the DSM-4 is used. Now, many of these disorders have similar symptoms. So, say for instance, depression comes with low mood. People with schizophrenia, which is another type of mental illness, come with low mood. ADHD comes with hyperactivity. You could find hyperactivity in manic illness. I'll come to all that and explain what all these things mean. So, they all come with similar symptoms, and unless you can recognize a pattern, then you will get the whole picture wrong. So, and it may take many years to reach an accurate diagnosis. So, your doctor may say, oh, we think this child has mania. That's what we think he has because of this, and this. And then in 2 years, they change it to another condition, and you're thinking to yourself, what's happening? Don't these people know what they're doing? So the diagnosis could change, with time. And it's only time that really informs you, that creates a broader picture of what is going on. And it helps to inform you about what is going on. So I'm going to try to review the differences in terminology, between, what the schools use, what the social service use, and what the mental health service use. And then next we will focus on the behavioral characteristics parents might see, when their children start to present with mental health problems. And finally, we're going to talk about how these disorders might impact on a child's behavior in the home, in school setting, and outside when they're with their friends, colleagues, and in the general environment. So now, this is just to give us an idea of what the schools will describe as mental health problems. So some of the children that you will see with mental health problems can actually continue to go to normal schools, but some of them have to go to special schools, and they will need special assistance. Now, the usual school classification for mental illness would be things like emotional disability, which lumps up a whole lot of mental health problems like depression, manic illness, things like dysthymia. You don't have to worry with all that. So they call emotional disability, other health impairment, and autism spectrum disorder. I'm sure many of you would have heard about autism before. So it's one of the most common, presentations that children come up with, and we're finding that actually the incidence of autism is actually increasing in the population. It could be because we diagnose them better. It could be because parents are better educated about them, so they're able to spot them earlier and report to health workers. So, so basically, so let me go to the next slide. So, like I was saying, the emotional disability means an inability to learn or progress that you cannot explain by either problems, issues with cognitive, which is how your brain processes information, or sensory, which is how your nervous system gets a sensory inputs from the environment, or other head factors. You can't explain it. The emotional disability, it just happens. It has nothing to do with, things that are happening internally to the person. And the student or child could exhibit one or more of the following characteristics over a long time. Now, some children could just have the symptoms for 1, 2, 3, 4 days. In that scenario, you wouldn't worry too much because, it's so fleeting, it comes and goes, right? It's only when it continues for a long time. Usually, these are arbitrary cutoff points. So sometimes we say, for depression, for instance, you need about 2 weeks. If the symptoms don't go on for 2 weeks, then you won't call the person depressed, right? Yes, it is arbitrary, but those are the standards, we go with. And so now, the emotional problems could be a tendency to develop physical symptoms or fears associated with personal or school problems. So, you know, a child could just have problems with certain academic, issues, and then start to suddenly develop emotional problems. So they cannot cope, they become flustered, they just start to show, a slide downwards in their performance in school. So maybe that would be the first thing you see. Or it could be a general pervasive mood or mood of unhappiness or depression, which is more difficult. And that parents usually would notice, because the child, no matter what you do, you cannot cheer them up. They become withdrawn, they become isolated, they don't want to play with their friends, and so something's wrong with the child. Or it's just inability to build or maintain a satisfactory interpersonal relationship with their friends. So, the other children will say they're oddballs, right? They don't mingle, they're different, and that creates more problem, because if you're not interacting with the other kids in your school, right, then the other kids will start to view you in a different way, and then it creates a vicious cycle. So it's a problem for these kids. And some of them may actually start to manifest some inappropriate behaviors or feelings under normal circumstances. So the inappropriate behaviors could be acting out, eating out at other people, being truant from school, being oppositional to the teachers, So they could manifest any of these things. And the worst of it all is frank psychosis, right? This is when the child completely loses, touch with reality. The normal connection that you and I have with reality, they lose it. So they may start to hear things, they may start to believe strange things are happening that are not really happening. So that's psychosis. And that's the thing people call mad. People say, oh, they're mad. In actual fact, of course, that's a very derogatory term, which we try not to propose. So, people are disturbed, not mad, But in Africa, for instance, you see a lot of vagrant psychosis on the road, just because people don't look after them. So, now, for my next slide. So, we've talked about the emotional disability. Now we're talking about the other health impairments. Remember, we're talking about the way the educational system would classify mental illnesses. So this just groups together all those, impairments where a child maybe does not have enough strength, vitality, alertness, concentration in school. It could be from any physical illness, asthma, it could be from COPD, it could be from heart conditions, it could be from, any problems, name it. Any condition that affects your vitality, your ability to concentrate. All those are lumped together. So those are also things that could present with mental health impairment. And that's what that's talking about. So, and the last one there is autism spectrum disorder. When I get to the slides, I'll explain the different types of autism that we have. So, but they're basically developmental disorders, and there are 5 of them. You have autistic disorder, you have Asperger's syndrome. I'm sure some of you have heard about Asperger's syndrome before. And there's the pervasive developmental problems, and then you have, there's something called Rett syndrome, and there's something called childhood disintegrated disorder. So all these things are lumped together as autistic spectrum. Children with this problem have problems with communicating with other people. So you may notice some peculiarities with the way they talk. you know, so they don't talk like you and I. They may use pronouns, you know, abnormally. They may refer to themselves as he instead of I, right? They may not maintain eye contact when talking. The body language, the non-verbal language could show some problems as well. So, so those children have problems with communication. They have problems with social relatedness. That's social interactions with other people. So they may just want to play on their own. And when they play with other people, they actually play to other people rather than with other people. So say two children are playing. One will just control all the toys and will not give the other kids a chance to play with the toy. And you know, the make-believe play that children learn to do, like mommy and daddy, you know, that kind of stuff when they're growing up. They cannot do it. They have problems with that because they don't have that abstract. Of course, most children don't have abstract interpretation until maybe when you get to 13. But these children just have problems with abstraction. They are very concrete. So they're not able to play in those terms. So they have those problems as well. And perhaps the more noticeable one is this stereotyped pattern of behavior or activities. So they would only play in a certain way. They want their toys lined up in a certain way. They want their rooms lined up in a certain way. And if you don't do it that way, if somebody just moves a single thing, they throw a major tantrum. So, so many children with autism, it used to be that they went unnoticed. Nobody really recognized it. I'm sure in Africa, people just don't even know what it is, and they probably will beat it out of you, you know? But it happens quite a bit. So it's, yeah, the Koboko stuff. And I'm sure when we come to ADHD, we'll see how the Africans actually deal with that sort of, you know, impairment. So now we're going to the mental health diagnosis, and these are the ones we're going to cover. Disorders that are first diagnosed in infancy, and it might surprise some of you that infants have mental health problems. You think, oh, mental health problems is for, you know, you and I, old people that are worrying too much about money, you know, and things. But actually, infants also have mental health problems. Children have mental health problems, and of course, adolescents, which is a very, very difficult period, is fraught with a lot of mental health problems. There's this, I put the fetal alcohol syndrome. This is something that happens, and perhaps that further buttresses the fact that children could have mental health problems. When your mom is pregnant with you and they drink a lot, of course you see a lot of women around drinking, competing with the men and drinking even when pregnant. So if you drink a lot when you're pregnant, your child could develop what is called fetal alcohol syndrome, in which case they're born with a certain type of facies appearance, right? So their eyes may slant in a certain way, certain parts of their head would, appear in a certain way, but then it also affects their brain, and so it affects their behavior as they grow up. I'll just go over that as we get to that point. Of course, there's schizophrenia and the other psychotic syndromes. There's mood disorders, there's anxiety disorders, which is quite common in children, and there's the eating disorders. So let's quickly talk about the disorders that first present in infancy and childhood. The pervasive developmental disorder, attention deficit, and disruptive behavior disorder. This is where you find ADHD. ADHD is a more common phrase. This is what people hear more than, attention deficit disorder. And then there's the tic disorder. Tic disorders are abnormal movements. So I'm sure you've seen people that they keep on blinking, 20 times in 1 second. They're blinking or making abnormal movements with their hands. If you've watched Big Brothers, has anyone watched Big Brothers yet? they have this knack for getting together an assortment of abnormal people. I'm sorry to use that phrase. You would always find something wrong with like 60% of them. And you see some with tic disorders, their eyes just going up and down, or just making certain vocalizations, certain sounds. They might just abuse people for no reason. And you think, what's going on here? I've not done anything wrong, But it's not them. They don't want to abuse you. It's just the disorder, So, and then the last one, there is other disorders of infancy and childhood. So, now, under the pervasive disorders, I'll just talk about these two, which are the most common, which are the ones people are likely to have heard about. Autistic disorder and Asperger's disorder. Autistic disorder is called childhood autism, and Asperger's disorder used to be called high-functioning autism, in which case these kids are sometimes referred to as savants, right? They are special kids. They could have special skills. They could be very, very good with mathematics, for instance, and know nothing else, they will come first in mathematics. They know mathematics more than professors because, they spend all their time solving mathematical problems. It could be just with mechanical things. So they'll be brilliant engineers if they're able to concentrate, but they would know nothing else. And they would have problems with behaviors, with social relationships and all that. So autism, there are three cardinal symptoms that occur in autism. There you see markedly abnormal or impaired development in social interaction. Like I was saying before, social interaction, we all need it. As what we're doing today is a form of social interaction. The men's group, yesterday we met. Even though Brother Shani did not tell his wife, we had some nice food, and he was very mindful of his weight anyway, so he didn't eat too much. It was only Brother Levo that actually got something for his wife, interestingly. So that shows what sort of a man he is.
God bless Brother.
Actually, I saw him and I thought I should do the same for my wife. But I said that would be fake. So
I will tell you.
So they have problems with social interaction. So they're lonely figures. They don't have friends. People don't like them. Because they are hoard. And it's not because they would not play with other people. It's because they cannot play with other people. It's not in their, the way God has wired the brain. It's not in them. It's not in their makeup. They cannot do these things. So they have problems with social relationships. I'll just spell out some of the social relationships so that if you see it in any child, you'll be able to pick it up. So, like I said, they oftentimes avoid eye contact with others. They use facial expressions inappropriately. Okay? So they may laugh or smile inappropriately when they should be crying with other people. So if there's a funeral, for instance, you just see the child giggling or laughing. And everybody will say, well, why are you doing that? It's not his fault, It's just the way he is. With non-verbal cues, the Yorubas will say, look, they let their children know their eyes. You look at my eyes when I'm angry, when I'm annoyed. You learn to read my body language. But these kids cannot read their parents' body language at all. They don't have any clue. So the parents, and it could be very embarrassing for the parents because unless you spell it out for the kid has no other way of knowing that you're really trying to get a message across. So they have the same problem with their mates when playing. So they're not good with non-verbal gestures because they cannot read it. They invade other people's private space, and they may resist physical affection. So when you say women, you know, I'm saying it because there are a few sisters here, women here, and you're trying to show love to your husband, and he just does not get it, and you're thinking, which planet is this man from? You know, it's simply because he may have traits, and this is the problem with mental health problem. We all have traits, right? All of us have bits of mental problems in us. It's just that we don't have enough for people to say we've got a disease, right? So I don't know what those genes do, but they carry all these traits. So people have those things, and it's only when it aggregates in this manner, where you have these core symptoms and all that, that people will say, oh, you've got this problem. So on another level, they fail to develop good pair relationships appropriate to their developmental level. So as we grow up, right, there are certain things a 4-year-old cannot do, right? And but as you grow up, the child develops certain skills, so they're able to form, you know, a more age-appropriate relationship. So if you start to notice that a child is not showing this developmental progress, then you know there might be a problem, and it would be a good time to talk to a doctor, family physician, or so. So these children, like I said, will not seek out other children in play. They tend to be solitary. They lack spontaneous seeking to share enjoyment, which means they won't bring anything to the table, you know. So 2 kids playing, one brings all the toys, the other one keeps all his own toys, and you know, that sort of stuff. And in adolescence, you just see it affects their relationships with other people, both, you know, intergender relationship and relationship with their close friends. So, and there's something called lack of emotional reciprocity, so which basically is what I've talked about, preferring solitary play, not involving others in activities, or they're just too mechanical in terms of how they present. So, and they lack an awareness of other people as well. So let's go on to the next one. This just says that these children also have a very restricted, I don't want to use the term repertoire of activities. In other words, they don't have many things they get involved in, you know. It could just be drumming. Drumming is all they do. They don't do anything else. You know, it could be singing. Singing is all they do. Nothing else, you know. So, and that could actually become problematic for them, because when they're in relationships with other people, you know, other people also want to enjoy the things they like, but these kids only want to do what they like. So even when they're talking to you, they only want to talk about what they want to talk about, not what you want to talk about. So, and they are so skilled in just bringing you back to what they want to do, right? And people become really frustrated with them, because it's almost like you cannot win with them. It's a one-way street with them. So, sorry about this old-time machine we have here, you know. So now, Asperger's syndrome, like I said, it used to be called high-functioning autism. The most outstanding trait of these children is they have impairment in social relationships. They don't have problems with language. as you come to know, people with autism have problems with language, which is, speaking with other people, the manner in which you speak with other people, both verbally and non-verbally. So they don't have major problems with language, and they don't have problems with intelligence. Most children with autism have problems with intelligence. They are mentally retarded. Some of them are not, but most of them are. So, which usually affects their academic performance, and they have to go into special schools and need some sort of support. So, but these children with Asperger's don't have problems with intelligence, but they again, so people, and they are the more problematic ones, right? Because people look at them and say, there's nothing wrong with you, you're doing well. You're good in maths, you speak very well, but how come you just don't get along with people? How come you're such an oddball? Even though everything else about you is good. It's because they've got Asperger's syndrome. I mean, I've seen a few of my colleagues, right? They're medical doctors, psychiatrists, name it. And they have traits of this illness. And it's really serious. You see them on the corridor, they don't greet you. If you don't go into their line of gaze, they will not even recognize you. And they might greet you today and they won't greet you tomorrow. And you'll be like, what do I do the next time? Should I greet this person or not? So they really confuse you. And so you look at them and you say, but how did this person get to this level if they have these problems? But it's actually because these children could do very well with other activities, but in social relationships they have problems. So, any questions? Pastors? No, they can never be pastors. I can assure you that. Okay. So now, I think I missed a slide there. The one talking about communication here. So impaired communication, and as I was trying to say, they have problems with comprehending language. They might use pronouns like, they misuse pronouns like I, you, she, he. They may repeat what other people say. So if you're talking to a child and the child keeps repeating what you say instead of having a proper dialogue with you, we call it echolalia, right? That's a problem. Or they repeat the things you do, the emotions you show. So say you show the emotion of anger, they will show it too. So it's almost like they are teasing you, playing with you, but it's a disease, So they're not doing it, just because they want to do it. So, okay. Now let's go to the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Now this is the most common problem that young people, children have. I probably had it, and I probably have seen traits of it in many children around me. You just see people jumping up on the bed, on the chair, you put them in the car, they want to get out of the car seat, they jump everywhere. You're in a queue, they jump to the front of the queue, you go to the airport, they make so much noise. You see some kids at the airport, right? They create a scene, right? In the plane where everybody is trying to have a quiet time, they make so much noise. So that's hyperactivity. Now, hyperactivity is what all kids do. They do it, we see them. I mean, I've seen kids running all over the place. But that's appropriate for kids, right? So a child could be hyperactive, could be active, let me use that phrase, could be active. It's not a problem if the parents don't see it as a problem. So long as you're happy with it, right? It's not a problem. And most of what we say in mental health and psychiatry is because these behaviors are deviant from what the average population, the sort of behavior average population would manifest. So if I say you're happy, so long as other people are not as happy as you are, then you're happy because it's, different. Now, if your happiness goes through the roof, and you're happy even though you should not be that happy, then it's a problem, And if you're too sad, which obviously is what we call depression. I mean, most of us get depressed from time to time. We feel low from time to time, but it doesn't last a long time, and everybody understands this. So it's not a problem because it's not, again, through the roof. So it's when your behavior really, it's just different from what is normal. That's what we call problems. So for children with ADHD, I put that slide there. Our brain is trying to process a lot of information going through us. And all the time we're trying to just focus on the more relevant things. You disregard the less relevant ones. Children with ADHD or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, if you look at that term, it says attention deficit on the one hand, and you then have hyperactivity on the other hand. So the two together is what represents this disorder. So these children these are some of the symptoms you see. They have a short attention span. So when you're talking to them, they might come to you and say, hey, mommy, I need this thing and that. And you're trying to tell them why they cannot have it. They jump to another topic. Oh, can we do this? And you've not really explained the first one to them. They're talking about something else. So they will come back to you and ask for the first one because they've not really listened to your explanation. They cannot focus. They have a short attention span. What you tell them is not even registering. So then they have problems with organization. So you see these kids as being quite chaotic. And it shows really, by the way, people with ADHD, the symptoms tend to disappear by adolescence, right? But for some people, probably about 40% of people, it doesn't disappear. So you see it in adults as well. And that used not to be recognized, but these days, we now know this thing continues into adulthood. And you see, sometimes it could be a plus. You see this, because they have so much energy, they do so many things that you and I cannot do. I mean, I wake up in the morning and start praying, God, I need energy today, because I need energy to go through the 8 hours of work, right? These people don't have problems with energy. They are full of energy, they can do stuff, they can do things. So, they fail to pay attention to details, like I was trying to say. So they just concentrate on a little part of the whole story. And so they miss out a lot. And they're unable to maintain attention. They get easily distracted. They have trouble listening when spoken to directly. They fail to finish their work, make lots of mistakes, and are quite forgetful. Of course, if you're not listening, you're going to be very forgetful. So, like I was trying to say, there are two classes of them. There are the hyperactive or impulsive ones. Impulsivity, which basically means you do things without thinking, because they are quite hyperactive, so they just jump to do things. So they fidget and squirm a lot. They have difficulty staying seated, and that's what I was talking about. You can't sit them down on the chair. They jump up, stand on the chair, stand on the bed, change seats, run around. It's there. Run around and climb on things, They have trouble playing quietly, so they play in a very loud way. And what we usually will say is they seem to be going on a motor. So when you speak to their parents will say, he acts as if he's driven by a motor. So it's almost like he has an endless reserve of energy. And in my clinic back in England, there was a kid I saw. It's the most extreme form of hyperactivity I've ever seen. It completely trashed my office. Usually what you do is you put a section there where you put their toys, everything for them to play with. This kid came, scattered all the toys all over the place. He came with his granddad, and of course there were problems at home, so he was living with his granddad, the mom and the dad. He was a mixed race child, so I don't know. The parents did not stay together, so this child was so hyperactive. It was so much fun to have around, even though I had to do a lot of cleaning after I left. So, but you could imagine how exhaustive this would be for the parent, because you cannot guarantee this child's safety. And that's one of the problems with them. They take too much risk. They're not aware of danger. They can just run across the road, I mean, most kids know not to run across the road. As you see them, they're so scared of dying, They don't run across the road. They know what is dangerous. But these kids with ADHD, they just run across the road. They can go and meet somebody that can beat them up and start to challenge them, because he's not aware that this other guy is taller than me, and just go and challenge them. And when they're in class, they blot out answers to questions before they're asked. So it's difficult for them to await their own turn. And they interrupt others quite rudely as well. So now there is a group of children that have combined hyperactivity and inattention, and these ones are even more difficult to treat. So, by the way, what we do to treat them is just basically we give them medications called stimulant medications. And that's strange, isn't it? This child is already hyperactivity and we're stimulating them again. In actual fact, what goes on in their brain is understimulated. Okay, so they have to compensate by being active. So what you do is then stimulate the connections between the brain cells so that, they don't have to act it out. So you're doing it for them in the brain. So it works very well for them. Sometimes it works magic. A child that has disturbed everybody for years, within 1 week of going on methylphenidate, you start to see major changes, But of course, the problem with that medication is, and we usually will tell the parents, is it could cause some degree of stunted growth. So the child may not gain the height you expect, may not gain the weight you expect. They may have headache, they may have problems with blood pressure. So the doctor would actually monitor the blood pressure regularly, monitor their height and weight. By the way, these side effects don't happen often, so it's not a big problem. So these are the strategies the parents could actually use to sort of mitigate some of these behaviors. So you can help them provide consistent structure and clearly define your expectations. So in other words, you tell them what you expect of them. If you go out with them, you're saying to them, look, we're going to a party today. I want you to sit down, be a good child. If that works. Hopefully it works, but that's what you have to do. I want you to be a good child. I don't want you running about. I want you, when you play with the other kids, don't play too loudly. Don't punch anybody, don't hit out at anybody. And then you have to give the child a chance to actually move about. So you don't just say, sit down there, don't move about at all. Because if you do that, in no time at all, they'll start to become uneasy and they'll become hyperactive. So you have to give them time and space to actually go and, burn some of those pent-up energies. And, this is what I was talking about earlier on, the secret code, which is usually eye contact that we try to make. With children with autism, they don't get the code, but these ones can. So you need to let the child know somehow when they're overstepping the bounds. So, and once they pick up on your cues, they simmer down a little bit. So, and you try to reduce stress and pressure when possible. Because, as you know, stress, pressure for anyone could result in a lot of mental, ill health. So, now this is another condition. So I'm going through all the possible conditions children would have, so that when you see them, I mean, we Africans, we black people, we Afro-Caribbeans, we're just so fond of trashing our kids too much. The kid does something really bad. I mean, sometimes they're trying to communicate to us that there is a problem going on with them. But we think it's just because they are being bad kids. But they are not bad kids. It's just that some processes are going on in them that we don't understand. And so some kids just don't like rules. That's completely oppositional. And that's called oppositional defiant disorder. They don't obey adult rules. So if you tell them, do this, they will do the exact opposite. And they just want to see what you will do, So they like to argue with you. So they'll say, okay, yeah, Mom, but we're going to school today. But why should I go to school? The principal didn't come to school yesterday, So they argue with you. And they refuse to comply with your request. And they blame others for their behaviors. They get easily annoyed. And they also get easily angry. And some of these kids end up having what we call conduct disorder. And when they grow up to be 18 or so, some of them, a large proportion of them, again about 40%, will develop antisocial personality, which many of you would have heard about. So the strategies for this kid, again, is to avoid power struggles. State your position clearly and, in a very concise way. Don't use too many words. Just, let them know where you are. Choose your battles wisely. So there are times when you just humor them. Let them do let them disagree with you, for instance. You don't want to start fighting them in front of your friends because they like attention, right? So that's when all these behaviors will become excessive. So you learn when to bring them down to size, There's a time and place for everything, the Bible says as well. So, but you need to establish clear rules and enforce them consistently. Avoid topics which may cause arguments. So over time, you get to learn what these kids are very passionate about and what they tend to argue about more. So you try to avoid those topics as best as you can. So, and you also help them discuss strategies for dealing with anger. So, because anger gets them into trouble quite a bit, so you try to, for instance, we all do it with our kids. We say, especially, between the elderly, if you have two kids, the elderly one and the younger one, we always say to the younger one and to the elderly one, if this one punches you, you don't do anything, okay? If you do it, I'm gonna trash you, So you give them strategies to deal with their angers, something that helps them to not act out, and you need to give them structure and clear consequences for their misbehaviors. Remember their opposition. So I think in England we would say you go on the naughty steps. Naughty steps. Does it work? Do any of you try that? Go on the naughty steps, count 1 to 100, You're not going to have this toy today. You're going to have only 1 hour on Xbox. today. Those things, that's what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to trash them, okay? You're not supposed to use cane. Anyway. remember I told you we're going to do things differently today. No trashing. It's actually a criminal offense. It's called child abuse.
Not really.
Eh?
Not really.
Oh, really?
Not really. You are allowed to spank. You're not allowed to beat.
Okay. So what is spank?
Serious ones.
On the bum?
Yes.
Not on the...
Not
Yes,
on the
on the
face.
bum.
Not on the face, okay.
Yes, not on the body.
Bring down the pant and
That's excessive aggression.
Or you pray for them to stop.
as you are doing it, you are saying you obey me.
Okay. I'm sure it works.
I
It works very well. That's why all of us have turned out well. You know when people say naughty steps, the child learns to know that this woman will not say more than naughty steps. So they'll just carry on doing what they'll do. So, like they say, do what I do. Or whatever way they say, yeah. Thank you. You know, I know how I discipline my children at home. You know? So, minimize downtime and plan transitions carefully. So, transitions means obviously from one activity to the other. You need to plan it because when they don't understand what you're trying to get them to do, they tend to argue with you more. So, and that behavior becomes more prominent. So, you try to plan transition carefully. And you try not to make, if you're in a group like, say for instance, you're a teacher in a school and you have a group of kids and one of them has oppositional defiant disorder, you don't want to make this kid the last one you give an opportunity to answer questions. Because that kid then becomes jumpy and wants just to be heard. And then it starts playing up. So you need to make sure they don't feel left out. So probably, not all the time would you call him first, but close to the first group you call, And conduct disorder I was talking about, again, it's a bigger problem compared with oppositional defiant disorder. These kids, they call them small devils. They bully other children, they threaten other children, they don't go to school, they don't have empathy for others, and lack appropriate feelings of guilt and remorse. And these are the sort of, we were talking about this yesterday, these are the sort of kids that would kill their mothers, right? The Newtown massacre, right? So the guy had a conduct problem, and he also had some mental illness. And he doesn't have any feeling of remorse or guilt. Because for you to do something so bad, you wouldn't care about the other fellow, right? You and I would shudder before we carry a gun and blow somebody's brain off. We wouldn't do that because we know the other person has a life, the other person was created by God just like you. They have a right to live. But these people lack they don't have empathy. They can't put themselves in this other person's position. So they are able to do things to other people without even thinking twice about it. So, and on top of all that, even though other kids, you've watched films where you see kids that they're big and because of that they bully other kids and so they have a small following, right? Other kids tend to go behind them because they think they'll protect them. Actually, underneath all that is a feeling of low self-esteem. They don't have they're not self-confident. They just want to show that bravado that, I'm thick, I can do things to people, And of course, one of the other traits they have is they lie a lot. So they lie to get out of trouble. Okay? So, of course, they get into trouble, so they have to lie to get out of trouble. And they get into frequent fights. They sometimes use weapons, and they sometimes destroy properties. I've had some of these kids. That's why I ran away from England, actually. Some of these kids would just carry stone and throw on your windows, crack your windows, run away, and you wonder what's going on. Or they will just remove, the caps from your wheel, your car wheel. Yeah. Your car is parked outside. They just remove. They're not going to sell these caps. They just remove it, and release some hair. When you get there, you have a flat tire. So they just do silly things and creates problem for everybody. So, but what are the strategies you could use with these kids? So they say you remember to praise them when they've done something good, right? So when they show positive behavior, you praise them. You say, oh yeah, you're doing well today, that's good. And if possible, you reward them for positive behavior. And also be aware that adults can unconsciously form and express negative impressions. So it's like self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So this kid learned to expect the way you'd react. So they say, well, no matter what I do, my dad is always going to say, I'm a bad boy. So why should I even try to be a good boy? So you need to try to monitor your emotions as well and communicate a positive regard for the child. Positive regard for the child just means you respect the child as a person. I know it's a bit difficult for some of us to process that, but you need, our Caucasian, friends, they do it better than us. They treat kids almost like they're adults, So you see a small kid, they say, hey, Yemi, how are you? Because you treat them like adults, they call their grandfather by name. So, you treat them with positive regard. Remember that children with conduct disorder like to argue, so you maintain calm, respect, and detachment. Give the child options. So, by that I mean, don't always. So, if your child wants to go, for instance, let me use a more simple example. The child wants to wear a particular dress. Don't say, oh no, this is the one you're going to wear. Give them options. Say, okay, we're going outdoors. You've got 3 clothes you could pick from. You could just choose one of them. So that way they don't give you much stress. And so the other things are just along those lines as well. Now, this is Tourette syndrome. It's one of the tic disorders. So we've moved on from conduct problems, ADHD, autism. I'm telling you the more difficult ones, so that when we get to the easier ones, by the time you're all tired and fagged out, you'll still be able to process these things. So the Tourette syndrome, these children, eye blinking is one of the things you see. They're blinking their eyes all the time, clearing their throat. Somebody just cleared their throat there now. They clear their throat all the time, almost like something stuck there, repetitive coughing, lip licking, fist clenching. So they echo what other people said, like I mentioned the other time, or the emotions of other people. They could jerk their limbs or just say verbal explicits, like, offensive words. I don't want to, this is God spoke it. I'm not going to say some of the offensive words they say, but they could say some very, really offensive words, Thank you very much. By the way, you said we're going to have a break.